make you a co-host so that you can share your screen if you have slides that you want to share.
Thanks.
And if you get notifications about the waiting room, don't worry, I'll take care of that.
Thank you.
And Yaikira, do you need to be co-host or?
No, Tracey's going to handle the slides, so she'll be the co-host.
Okay, perfect. So
Thank you.
I'll make her co-host when she logs in here.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. Hi, Tracey. I'm going to make you co-host so that you can share your slides.
Hi, Tracey.
You're muted, Tracey.
I'm like, why is no one answering me? So we don't have a chair today. Feels like I'm at home. So we don't have a chair.
That's okay.
So Yaikira is my co-presenter too, and can you also make her co-host? I'll be sharing though, I think, the screen.
All right, there we go.
Thank you. And we're presenting second, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Welcome, everyone. We're so happy that you're here. As you enter, go ahead and throw in the chat where you're calling in from today. Am I supposed to be admitting people? Because I'm admitting everyone. Is there like a...
Oh, no, that's okay.
Okay, I'm like, everyone come in.
I've got the waiting room.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah,
You're fine. I'm just trying
when
to
I make you co-host, the notifications pop up for you, but I've got the waiting room.
Thank you.
No problem.
Very nice. Las Vegas, Illinois, Arizona, Northern California, Texas. Well, welcome. We're so excited to have you here joining in our conversation. And did you just want to start in another minute, or are we good to start now? What are you thinking?
Maybe just half a minute to make sure everyone has
Sure. 25 seconds. Nevada, originally from Wisconsin, San Marcos, Texas. CCSD, very nice. Lots of teachers, people affiliated with school districts, welcome. And I'll turn it over to our co-presenter in the space to go ahead and start.
Amy, did you need to say
I don't
anything?
know if we have a chair for this session. Do we have a chair in here? Okay. All right. Well, I'm Amy. I'm the Zoom host here. So welcome everybody. So I'm going to turn it over to our presenters here in just a moment, but just as a couple of reminders, this session is being recorded and our presenters are going to have each about 20 minutes and then about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ritu. And
Yeah.
let me know if I'm mispronouncing your name. And
Okay, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about that. So, good afternoon, everyone. Or I'm on Eastern time, so forgive me for not remembering what time it is over there. So what I'm going to be talking about today, I am an associate professor of education at SUNY Oswego. And this kind of happened to me over the pandemic, especially with Kamala Harris running. Just the perceptions of her, as you know, as an intersectional biracial woman, were horrible. And they were very narrow and limiting. And it just made me think about, and at the same time we were seeing, seeing the violence and murders of Black Americans. We were seeing AAPI hate. There was just so much going on. I felt like I needed to kind of solidify it for myself and think about it clearly. So what I wanted to start out is, the Asian diaspora is humongous. And right now we're all kind of lumped as AAPI. And even Kamala Harris was sort of just being described as Asian or Indian. And then some teachers were saying she was Native American Indian. So there was all sorts of mess kind of there. So I really wanted to narrow that down. So we need to know history and we need to know geography when talking about South Asian. So South Asian is not just India, but Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and parts of Myanmar, because historically, during the partition and during the British rule, some Sikh American or Sikh Indians moved to Burma at the time, Myanmar, to fight against the British with the Japanese. So those are all implications for us as Americans. And so this is what this looked like pre-colonial, pre-1947. It was all India, but it was basically all British rule. And so the post-colonial aspects of education are clearly seen in India still and here still. So that ties into sort of this notion of white supremacy within our curriculum and how we can disrupt that. So some of the focus for me today was to identify major themes in South Asian children's and YA and NA books, because now, and I'll talk about how there's been sort of an influx of this, examine how the themes help to understand and expand perceptions, and then making connections and looking to the future. So in 1989, a white woman named Suzanne Fisher Staples produced the only sort of South Asian book about Shabanu, a Pakistani peasant. Is very poorly written. She was Muslim. It was very stereotypical, well, naturally, but it got an award. So, and it wasn't until 2002, Tanuja Desai Hadir wrote Born Confused. It got a lot of acclaim and a lot of people, acknowledged it, but it kind of died. It was just sort of a couple of us who really loved it. And then we didn't see anything until 2007, and probably no one's heard of this, Blue Boy by Rakesh Satyal. This was in 2007, and it was about a Punjabi boy that's a part of India that is gay, and he's in middle school. And it's in 1992, and sort of it talks about the themes that many of us grew up with in terms of bullying and stereotyping, but with an additional layer of him being gay. And then 2008, Padma's book, Climbing the Stairs, it takes place in India, but it really focuses on issues of the patriarchy, oppression, history. It's just a beautiful book. It's probably one of my favorite books ever. So then in 2006, for those of you that are kind of well versed, Kavya Vishnaswanan, she was a Harvard sophomore, and she wrote this book, How Opal Mehta Got Kissed, Got Wild, and Got a Life. And everyone was like, oh, look at this. This is so diverse. This is wonderful. So we find out that she actually plagiarized several parts of her book from Megan McCaffrey and Sloppy First. Also Meg Cabot. I'm trying to remember the other big name authors at that time, but if you look on Wikipedia, they have listed out all of the parts of her book that's been plagiarized. So again, there's sort of this resurgence, this kind of emergence of South Asian writing, and it kind of got lost again. So these are some of the picture books, and I tried to put some of the earlier ones. Uma Krishnaswamy wrote a lot, and she has a lot of books, beautiful books, picture books about South Asian issues and diaspora. And her first one was Monsoon in 2003. And then in 2007, Kashmira Seth wrote My Dadima, that's grandma, wears a sari. And so for a long time, it was a lot of this informational stuff, just sort of what the culture is like, which is great, but we're kind of seeing a little more. If you look, Hot Hot Roti, Bilal Cooks Dal, Mabruk, you're seeing more of how the diaspora is existing in the United States, not just as an other. You're seeing us integrated a little bit more. Oops. So some of the themes that I'm going to kind of take you through today, these are recurring with variations, and they're intersectional and include intersectionality because we can't take that out with BIPOC people. So the books will focus on history, identity, and so we'll talk a lot about the culture. It's supposed to, a lot of times the culture is embedded naturally within the protagonist's lifestyle, but there are also, things that you might have a glossary, you might have descriptions or pictures of things. First generation Desis. Desi is a term for South Asian, because I think a lot of times we get lumped in with Southeast Asian, and that's technically Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, that area. So South Asian is very narrow. And then family dynamics. We'll talk a little bit about immigration and how that connects to the United States, and then scandals. Those are a big thing. Gossip's a big thing within the Desi community, and scandals kind of pop up. I was a scandal because I wasn't a doctor. Now I'm a doctor, but not the right doctor. So, we'll see how that kind of pops up in books. This was one of the first books, Marina Budos, Tell Us We're Home, about refugee children. And one of the refugee children was Bangladeshi and talked about, how she was treated in school and how her mother, I believe, if I remember correctly, was a cleaning woman, and the issues with that. So I'm trying to show you kind of what our dynamics have been. This is from Unsettled. It just came out. It's in verse and talks about the resettlement from Pakistan to the United States. And I just thought it kind of encompassed everything that we're going to see. So my father gets the news, a job offer in America. He says yes, because my uncle is here to help. He says yes, because schools there are better. He says yes, because of job security. He says yes. The yes slices our old world away. And this is something that's obviously still happening today. We're seeing immigration issues. I gotta admit, I was a little disappointed by Kamala's talk the other day. But there's the coming to the United States for job security and for a better life for your children. But then a lot of times people come here and then want to go back. So you get you come here, and one of my good friends, when we were 13, her parents brought her back to India, and she was so traumatized. So there she was in sort of gifted and talented classes. She was doing well. And when she got back, she was a woman in India, and her life changed completely. So there's this tension about how much do you stay with your culture and how much do you kind of get to be yourself and develop your own identity. So this list is by no means exhaustive. We're not a monolith, just like any other BIPOC group. But I was trying to kind of highlight the voices that I've been hearing over the pandemic. And my sort of view of this is it wasn't until When Dimple Met Rishi that these books started coming up and we started seeing them. And if you look at the covers, and this is obviously the newer cover of When Dimple Met Rishi, but what can you see? And you can just pop this in the chat. How are these covers different? How do they appear different to any reader or potential reader? And I kind of can't see the chat, so let's see. Oh, there it is. So first of all, When Dimple Met Rishi, it's When Harry Met Sally, right? We're taking it straight from an American byline, something that's well established. Second, this woman in Born Confused is clearly South Asian. She's very Asian looking. She appealed to me right away, like I saw myself, but nobody else, unless they're South Asian, is gonna see themselves. This is cute. This is a love story. It's not gonna weigh heavily on people who don't want that. Everyone likes a love story. That's why Netflix produced it. So if you see, we're kind of changing the trajectory of how South Asians look, and how that can adjust people's understanding. So some of the history that's covered in these texts are the partition, colonial oppression, the caste system, and then religious divisions. And these are all very much in play in India, and we're seeing sort of the effects in the United States within our communities. So we're seeing how the caste system plays out still in the United States. So you have your immigrants from South Asia who came in and became doctors and engineers and the Brahmin caste professionals. And you see also people coming in who are small business owners and positioned differently. And so the caste system plays out and you don't ever leave it, even when you leave the country. If you've read Isabel Wilkerson's book, she also talks a little bit about that. They kind of play into the American caste system. In religious divisions, obviously, even with the pandemic, we're seeing those issues. We're seeing the way that it's devastated India and how it's affected some of the Muslim population more than the Hindu population in terms of who's getting help and who's being lifted up. And so some of the books that dealt with it, Amal Abound is about a Pakistani girl who was insolent to a higher caste member, so she was taken as a servant. Climbing the Stairs is about World War II and Indians' role in the war. Ahimsa is about the partition and freedom fighters. Bamboo People is about fighting in Burma at the time. And then The Bridge Home, I'm sure everyone's familiar with, but it really talks about the caste system and sort of how difficult it is to kind of work against this. And also, it wasn't as explicit because this is for middle school, but the exploitation of young girls and the abuse, not just physical, but sexual and, work abuse. And then there's identity. So particularly in the YA-NA realm, culture is a big one. So you'll see within the diaspora or within the subgroup, there's not just Muslim and Hindu, but there's also Bengali and there's Punjabi and Gujarati and Tamilian, which Kamala Harris is and Padma Ventraman is. So that's South Indian, another different kind of language. So religion, language, and then food is a major part because it's part of your heritage, but it's part of when you were given dal at lunch and curry at lunch and it smelled up the cafeteria and you were the outside kid. It's part of, you're wearing outfits and your mom comes to school to pick you up in a salwar kameez and people are asking you what she's wearing. So all those things are kind of a part of the identity that happens within these books. So just a couple that I wanted to pull. And this is sort of how first generation, so our parents came from India and we're sort of born here and growing up and trying the best we can, but kind of struggling between two worlds. So this is one of the newer one, Paneer Pie, came out in 2020. Her mom teaches a cooking class and she starts teaching Indian food and everyone laughs at it and she's so embarrassed. But then one popular girl decides it's cool and then everyone thinks it's cool. So it's kind of interesting. Ask Me No Questions takes place after 9/11 and a Muslim family is trying to get to Canada. Honey and Issues, Guide to Fake Dating. Again, it's sort of about, this is more middle school level and kind of dealing with identity and kind of what the expectations your parents have. The Henna Wars, again, what I loved about this is it's about appropriation. So the protagonist is very skilled at henna. That's the stuff that goes on your hands. It's called mehndi in Hindi. And then a white classmate sets up a stall and sells it and everyone goes to the white classmates stall because they're doing a fundraiser. So that's kind of, there's a lot of talk about who gets to be authentic and who gets to share in those ideas. Love, Hate, and Other Filters, and I put internment here first and then I switched it, but Samira Ahmed's books deal a lot with dealing with parents, dealing with the culture and developing your own identity within this new space and negotiating that. So I ended up staying with this, but if you give me another day, I'll probably switch it back to the next column. In American Badia, this just came out and I saved this for last because Anuradha, she wrote about me. She didn't know she wrote about me. After I finished the book, I emailed her right away. She wrote about where I grew up outside of Chicago. She wrote about this restaurant, the Pita Inn, that I used to go to. She wrote about the fetishism that young Indian girls go through. She wrote about the disappointment of her parents in her for exploring a different role than they assumed. So she really kind of just encapsulated anything. And even at this age, the fact that it made me cry, it made me pause, like that's what you want from your kids. You want them to see themselves within the curriculum. You want to see them themselves and feel heard and wanted. And then family dynamics. And what we're seeing, some of the reasons I think we're getting not just more South Asian literature is just not just because of the disrupt text movement or the We Need Diverse Voices, but also my generation is growing up and doing those things. And now we're seeing a second generation, which is more biracial kids, and you're gonna start seeing different books that way. Then there's also cultural versus spiritual. So I don't think I'm spiritually Hindu, but in terms of religion, but culturally, yes, some of the things are so ingrained, I can't get away from them and I never will. And then scandals, the scandals of, I remember I was a talk of town because I drove cross country by myself after college and I didn't have my brother with me and I didn't have my parents with me. I just did. And there was just, there's the little murmurings of what are you doing? And there's a word called sage, which means bold. So that was me. And so here are some of the books that we're seeing that kind of represent the family dynamics. By Basmati Bat Mitzvah, again, about a Jewish Indian girl growing up. internment. I know many of you are familiar with that, so I'm going to just skip that. Sarah Hussein, she gets into a fight with, well, I shouldn't say that. She's attacked by a white male classmate, and then her house gets vandalized. And so it's a lot about how she's dealing with, establishing her Muslim identity and kind of living in this world in Texas. The Marvelous Mirza Girls just came out, and it's really about sort of dealing with the family dynamics of when going back to India and how things are different and how you're navigating it. The Love and Lies of Rakshana Ali is about a young girl who's struggling with their sexuality and struggling to come out to her parents, which is really difficult. Counting Down with You, it just came out also a couple of weeks ago, and I love it because she wants to major in English. And again, my story, she wants to major in English. Her parents want her to be a doctor. And they're constantly saying, we moved here to give you a better life and you're gonna throw it away majoring in English. And then on top of it, she's tutoring a white male who she has a crush on, and she was alone with him without her brother chaperoning, and all hell breaks loose. So there's a lot of little aspects that people outside of the culture will find a little surprising. Written in the Stars, she has a white boyfriend, and so her parents take her to Pakistan to get her secretly married, and she has to escape. So this one is heartbreaking, but it's beautifully written. And then Marian Sharma Hits the Road. This is also about Muslim individuals, and the male protagonist is gay, and one of the female protagonists is a model. So she models skimpy attire, which makes her family crazy. So just some of the issues that come up.
Ritu, you're just about out of time here.
Okay, all right, so I'll just sort of wrap up. But so these are some of the reasons to kind of look to the future. Some of the things we're looking at is solidarity, because there is sort of a pull between the diaspora and not just BIPOC, but they're coming together. So we're seeing more protagonists who are not just normal, quote unquote, but you're seeing them in multiple roles, and also fantasy. So, and I will stop there so that the other group has enough time. So thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Let's turn it over now to Tracey.
Hey everyone, it's so great to be here, and I'm so happy to share space with you. I loved your presentation. It really is paired nicely with what me and my dear amiga and thought partner, Yaikira Vazquez Rivera, are going to talk about today. And so to continue this conversation and thinking about representation and centering the voices and stories of our communities, I noticed a lot of stories about girls. And the name of our presentation today is called Latina Girls Rising, centering and amplifying Latina girls' experiences through YA literature and middle grades literature. And my name is Tracey Flores, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Texas at Austin, where I teach courses in language and literacy and community literacies. And I'm here with my dear amiga, friend, thought partner, Somos Escritoras writing mentor, Yaikira Vazquez Rivera, who is also a mentor with me in this book club that we designed called Chicas Fuertes Book Club, which we're going to talk about in this presentation. And I am going to, in just a second, turn it over to Yaikira, who's going to bring the voice of one of the girls that we work with in our book club, that we read alongside with in our book club, as we were reading and discussing The First Roll of Punk by Celia Perez. And so I'm going to turn it over to Yaikira, who's going to share some images that Natalia shared in response to her connections to the book.
Perfect. Thank you, Tracey. So one of the first chapter books, or the first chapter book that we read in the Chicas Fuertes book club, is The First Rule of Punk. Malu is a middle school girl who's going into the 6th grade, whose mom moves her to Chicago. She's also an assistant professor. Loved the book. She is a biracial girl. Her dad is white, who loves punk music and loves going and listening to rock music and then going to record stores. and her mom is first-gen Mexican, so she was born in the United States. And so she's in between both cultures of, I want to be punk, but I also am navigating what does it mean to be a Latina, and how do I navigate between people who are really close to their heritage and her who is trying to figure out what does being Latina mean to me and how do I put it into my life. And one of the wonderful girls in our group, Natalia, did this collage while we were reading The First Rule of Punk. And one of our things was trying to connect our experiences as Latinas and connecting it to the book of First Rule of Punk. How do we see ourselves in Malu? And one of the ways was, how do we move away from this like stereotypical, what does it mean to be a Latina? And I was inspired by Malu and dyed my hair purple, like she dyes her hair a funny color in the book. And so Natalia is also Mexican American. So she has a lot of images of what does it mean to be an American girl, but also what does it mean to be a Latina who doesn't speak English, and who is balancing what does it mean to hold space in a place that space is not given.
And then as we were finishing our conversations with the book, we wrote a little bit about our connections and what we were learning from the characters in the book. And Natalia wrote, I felt that Malu was finally able to define herself after dyeing her hair and performing at the Anti-Talent show, because when her mom saw her perform, she realized that Malu is still embracing her Mexican culture, just in a non-traditional way. So there was a lot of tension between her and her mom, who she called super Mexican, and who she couldn't relate to because she didn't see herself like that. At the same time, Malu realized how free she felt and was still embracing her heritage. Most importantly, she was embracing every aspect of herself without fear or judgment. I was really able to connect with this because through experience, I learned that while I don't do all the traditional Mexican things, I'm able to embrace my culture through other things that matter to me, like acting, music, and activism. So as our colleague who shared just before us, Ritu, said, how she cries, I want to cry reading this because I feel what this young girl feels today, and also when I was her age. And so that is what we are going to share about, this Chicas Fuertes book club that we have been reading and discussing alongside these brilliant 7th through 9th grade girls and 2 of my pre-service teachers who are going into student teaching this year, as well as myself and Yaikira. And in just a little bit, we'll share a little bit more, but here we are with our First Rule of Punk books after one of our first meetings discussing the books. And to continue to ground why this matters to us, but why this should also matter to you, Yaikira is going to share her story about coming into and finding herself in books.
Oh, thank you. Oh,
sorry.
There you go. Thank you, Tracey. So I am a classroom teacher. I was not born in the United States. Spanish is my first language. I moved from Puerto Rico to Texas when I was 4. So I started school in kindergarten in Texas. I asked my parents what was my bilingual education story, because I was not given bilingual education. I was forced to speak English and lost some of my Spanish until I reclaimed it. And they were told by registrations, by principals, that I was going to speak English either way. They were just going to put me in the Spanish classes and the bilingual class to help me learn English, which I thought was extremely unfortunate and had to work through. That caused me a lot of pain as a 25-year-old to know that at that time I was really greatly, deeply hurt and how much it still affects me. And as a classroom teacher, I didn't read books about my Puerto Rican experience or Latin experience until I graduated and became a bilingual teacher at 22. I'm 25 now. And so it took that long to be able to find myself into a book. And even in my high school and middle school experience, all the books that we read were of white narratives, and there was no character like me. So with my experience in teaching 1st and 3rd grade, and now I teach a mixed classroom of pre-K and kindergarten students, I collect children's books of my experience. So I have Alma y cómo obtuvo su nombre, Alma and how she got her name. That's a book that's written in English and in Spanish. I have my own name story, and my name story is extremely special to me. And so that was the first book that I read that was like, wow, someone else has a really long name like me. And reclaiming that. Island Born is a girl who's in New York. and she's trying to figure out her own culture. She's a young woman. Isla is about another young woman, a young girl who talks to her grandmother and how her grandmother describes Puerto Rico. They fly over from New York to Puerto Rico. There's Vámonos a San Juan, Villancillo, De Donde Eres, Where Are You From? Arroz con Leche is a rhyming book. And so all of these books I have in my own library with my own experience as a Puerto Rican woman, because I never found books about me, about the Puerto Rican experience. And the reason I collect these books is because I would like to be a mother one day, and I want to be able to have these books in my home to be able to give to my children and to read to my children with the way that I unfortunately was not given that opportunity.
And in the same vein as Yaikira's story, I'm going to share my own story of, this is 6th grade Tracey, when my hair, we were talking about our hair before this, when it went from being straight to kind of poofy to then curly, and how we've embraced those curls. And that makes me think back about society's views of what beauty is and what we think of as beautiful. And during this time I was reading, I devoured Sweet Valley Twins and Babysitter's Club, and I got lost in the world of Sweet Valley and middle school cliques and first boyfriends and Todd Wilkins. And I thought I was Elizabeth. Like I like to read. I like to write. And then I really realized I was lost in these books. I didn't see myself there. I didn't see my family there. And so I stopped reading for a time. And it wasn't until my junior year of high school when I was able to select my own book, because we were starting to be at that point where we were assigned books, that I came back to reading and came back to myself through Gary Soto's book, Jessie, which was published in 1994. And I will forever have a love for Gary Soto because of how this book, I saw parts of myself in there. I saw the strength of a family, the strength of a community, and this desire to make your situation better. And I'll never forget that book because of how it moved me into myself as a Latina, as a Chicana. And now I can't get enough of books with these Latina Chicana protagonists. Some of my favorite books that I love, The Tequila Worm by Viola Canales, Yaqui Delgado Wants to Kick Your Ass by Meg Medina, The Moon Within by Aida Salazar, which when I was at the age about to start my period, or when girls change, my mom gave me Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which, answered some questions. And The Moon Within takes it to a level of like this place where it's part of our cultural tradition, these ceremonies, that I wonder how I would feel about my period and getting my period if had I had that to think about in different ways. And then of course, the first rule of punk, I am Malu through and through. And so this is our stories about why this work matters to us and why we seek to read alongside these girls and talk intergenerationally as well. And then I'm thinking about some of the scholarship around representation. I'm going to turn it over to Yaikira, who's going to share a little bit for you.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I just ordered this book to read this summer. This book is called Side by Side, the U.S. Empire, Puerto Rico, and the Roots of American Youth Literature and Culture. It is written by an author and assistant professor, Marilisa Jimenez Garcia. And if you follow her on Twitter, she's amazing. She talks about the diaspora of Puerto Ricans and youth literature and how we can involve it into curriculum. In her foreword in the book Side by Side, she has a passage written by Profesora Emerita Sonia Nieto from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And she talks, Profesora Sonia Nieto talks about when was the first time that she saw herself as a Puerto Rican in a book or in a newspaper. And the newspaper was from 1972, and it's called Interracial Books for Children. And she touches upon that some of these books weren't really inclusive books. These were not books that showed Puerto Rico in a very inclusive and good light. And so she said she went off to school and continued to find books and authors. And so there is a passage that I would like to read from the foreword. And it says, I was recently reminded of the soul-numbing impact of never seeing one's own people in the books when I picked up Carlos Busan's semi-autobiographical novel about the Filipino experience, American experience, written in 1946. And the book chronicles the plight of Filipinx migrant workers in the United States before World War II, including the graphic scenes of racism and exploitation in the fields and factories of California and the Pacific Northwest. A recently released edition of the book in 2019 begins with a new foreword by Elaine Castillos that asks a poignant question. Do you remember how old you were when you first read a book that had a character who looked and lived in it like you? Maybe the first book you read was like that, and every book after it since, and you've never had to wonder about finding someone like yourself or the people who made you in the books. You've always been right there at the center, unquestioned. And this hit me really hard because the first time I saw a book written about someone myself was at 22 as a teacher, looking for books for my own kids who were 6 and 7 years old, who the curriculum told me to read books about the white experience and Americanism in a way that they could not connect to. And so I find the forward and these excerpts to be really powerful, that now we are seeing ourselves being written in the experience, but other people are having that life-altering experience of being able to see themselves in a book as well.
And in conversations with our young girls, the books that they remember in which there were Latino or Latina characters that they read in school were Esperanza Rising, which was published in 2000, and Becoming Naomi Leon, which was written in 2004 and written by the same author. And I'm not saying that these books are bad or anything like that. And there has been this wide range of books that have been published in the recent years, with The Fire on High, The Education of Margot Sanchez, Juliet Takes a Breath, Fat Chance, Charlie Vega, Lupe Wong Won't Dance, and I can go on and on and on. And so I really encourage you to think about the books that you're placing in front of your students and helping them to see representations of themselves, contemporary as well as historical. And so the Chicas Birthdays Book Club, we started meeting in March, right after the big snowstorm in Texas. I wanted to make sure everyone was okay. And so we started meeting virtually in March, and we've had 8 meetings, and we've met via Zoom. And we start our meetings by sharing celebrations so we can honor each other in that space. And then we move on to discussing, responding to texts through dialogue, through artistic representation. There are 6 chicas in this group with us. They range from grades 7 through 9, and they live in Texas, Illinois. And so this remote space that we heard there's lots of losses, there's a lot of gains, because we never would have been able to connect in this way had we not, really learned in the moment about what this powerful platform can do for us and our reach. And they're all past participants of Somos Escritoras, which is a writing program that I developed for Latina girls that invites them to write, share, and tell their stories using art and theater and writing. And so we worked with them before, and Yaikira is also a mentor in that space. And then the mentors in this space, there were 4 of us, and 2 of them are my pre-service teachers, and then Yaikira, a classroom teacher, and then myself as a teacher educator. All of us identify as Latina, Mexicana, Puerto Rican, Mexican American. And the purpose of this club was to read books written by self-identified Latina, Chicana, Puerto Rican writers that featured Latina protagonists as the center of the book, not a sidekick, not someone who needs to be saved, someone who is, going through life and figuring it out, and they have their family, and they have, they're the center. And many of the books were award-winning books as well. And so because of time, I'm going to speed up just a little bit more. And so the books that we've read so far, we started off with 2 picture books, Planting Stories, The Life of Librarian and Storyteller Pura del Prey, and then Selena, Queen of Tejano Music. And we picked these books about historical and contemporary figures to ground our work as the importance of telling our stories and the importance of representation, but about the many ways that we can be Latina. And then we moved into conversations of the first rule of punk, and we actually finished that book. Yay. It took a while, but yay, we finished it. And now we are in the middle of Mercy Suarez changes gears. And at the end of June, we're going to have our final meeting, and we all agreed, the girls wanted to reconvene in September to continue reading books together. So we're super excited to see how we continue to grow and learn from each other, because we learned so much from our girls. And then Yaikira is going to share a little bit about our discussions that we've had around the books.
Yeah, so while we were reading these books, we would let the girls, we would pose questions and let the girls talk about the books. And then we just kind of let the conversation come naturally about how they connected with the books, what do they want to continue to talk about, and then their own experiences in life and school as Latin American girls. So we talked about gender strips, are the family roles, what does it mean to be a señorita, Latina-ness, the set of traits of that, language, what does it mean to be a Latina enough, speaking Spanish, non-speaking Spanish, Spanglish, translanguaging, familial expectations, and then cultural connectivity and expressions.
And we had really deep conversations, and what we were learning as this was going on, I realized I flipped the slides, Yaikira. What we were learning was, so sorry. We did. So what we were learning in this space as we were talking about gender scripts and roles and how they were seeing differences in the ways that they were being raised in relation to their brothers, and then the ways that the boys were treated and the expectations at schools and some of the roles that were put on them to be like co-helpers or help to like make sure the boys behave, or just some interesting conversations that was all led by them. We did not like, they went off and we were like, whoa, wow, what, does this ever change? Like, whoa. And so these were the conversations we were having, and really these familial expectations and how they were navigating these different spaces. And then I'll turn it over to Yaikira again.
Okay, and so what are some of the things that we're learning in a group? We're learning that we have shared generational experiences between Latinas and our ed mentors, all kind of coming from different age ranges, and when we all were between the 6th and 9th grade, ways in which we, the girls and mentors, use our voice to push against systemic inequities. We also touch upon how we work together to find resources and brainstorm and discuss changes that we want to have to create a more equitable education system. Like I said, a lot of these girls still continue to not see themselves in public education, and we talked about like I'm no longer in school. I'm not a student, and I didn't see myself. And here are these girls again in 2021 who are not seeing themselves. And then we also talked about like women of all ages can learn from each other in a shared community, coming from different age ranges, different backgrounds, and different education experiences and different immigration experiences.
And what we also are seeing is that our learnings are also really central to the books that we are reading, and the ways that the girls have, different women they look up to, or, tias or aunts or grandmothers, and just these different communities. And we're seeing that also play out in our book club as well. And so with that, I just want to leave you with some of the words of our chicas fuertes, and how they really want spaces like this in school. They want to be able to read books where they see themselves and where they can express their ideas and share their opinions without feeling judgment, and that opportunity to engage in some of these conversations that might be quote unquote hard, but help them to figure out the things that they're experiencing. And they also really want all of us to know that they are not damsels in distress. They are aware of what's going on in the world, and they really want to be the change that they seek in the world. And so with that, we hope that you will reach out to us. Here is my information, here's Yaikira's information. And I also put our Twitter handles, as well as the Twitter handle for Somos Escritoras. And I'm so grateful that you're all here today, because that gives me hope, and that these books are gonna be in our classrooms. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Tracey and Yaikira. So any question, we have time for a few questions. If anyone has a question for our presenters, so you can put it into the chat, any questions in the chat, or unmute.
Yeah, so I have a question. Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. It was really encouraging and empowering. Something that I thought was really interesting. I taught a children's and young adult lit class this past semester at the University of Houston, and something that my students, there were, it was a small class of like 15 pre-service teachers, and they are all Latina. And something that, and we were reading, and they had a selection of texts, like 6 texts to choose from various groups. And then for one text they were reading, Esperanza Rising. And one of my students, or like multiple students, were talking about how like whenever they were in school, the teachers would choose texts by Latinx authors, but it felt forced. Like the writing where they would use English and Spanish together, that it felt forced, and that they felt like someone else was talking about how and so anyway, yeah. So did that ever come across in any of the conversations that y'all were having?
So we did have a lot of conversations about language. Some of our girls have the experience that they are Mexican American, so they were born in Texas or in Illinois, and they don't have experience being able to speak their own language, or they felt forced to speak English and really shamed for not being able to speak Spanish. So that the conversation around the forcedness of language hasn't come up in that way necessarily when it comes to reading books, but we have talked about it in Somos Escritoras, where a lot of these books that are like Esperanza Rising is a great book, but it's also a default book. A lot of these default books are really old in comparison to The First Rule of Punk, where it's very much more natural. I think someone asked if these books were bilingual, and The First Rule of Punk is in English, but when she speaks to the older generation of Latinos, they speak much more in conjunction, where it's not like really forced that they're like saying like hola, but they're just like having conversation. The next thing they come up is like they're talking about tacos, and then the tacos come up, and then they're like, oh yeah, this enchilada recipe. And so it comes up much more naturally. So we have talked about that in Somos, but not yet in the Chicas Fuertes book club.
And I'd love to connect with you too. You're in Houston, we're in Austin, so please reach out. I like to think together. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And something else I guess I wanted to add is that because I was working with undergrads, a lot of my students said like they had read it in like middle school and they really disliked it, probably because of authenticity, the feeling of forcedness. But then I think as adults, they said that they read it again, and just like the sociopolitical issues and the way that it resonates and makes them think about our world now, that like they'd come to appreciate it in a different way, which I thought was really, really cool.
And after hearing them name those 2 books, Naomi Leon and Esperanza Rising, I actually went out and bought them because I'm like, I need to reread these because I hadn't read them since I was preparing to be a teacher.
Thank you.
I'll weigh in if I have a minute. I thought that both presentations were wonderful, and Tracey, you know, I always admired the work you do with your students and reaching out to the community. But the other idea about accessing books is I tell my pre-service teachers, there's no way you can read enough, and you have to just keep reading, right? The other thing about the community is I'm never going to be the person who's read the most Asian representation literature, but I'm going to read some, but I'm going to now, Ritu, I'm going to reach out to her more often when I want to do this, so that I don't just rely on Padma or the other people that I know pretty well, because I was amazed at how many she's offering. But we are in the world where young adult literature, and certainly children's literature, has been around long enough that there will be canonical text. There will be landmark text. I mean, I think Born Confused shouldn't be thrown out with the bathwater because it's old. We need to know these. Esperanza Rising, I think, is still wonderful, but it's old, right? And where we're wrong is if that's the only thing we're offering, is the first one we ever discovered, right? And we're forgetting The First Rule of Punk, right? So, but I think you guys are covering that. I just think it's a point we need to keep making to our students and to new teachers all the time.
And that's
the
why
library needs to grow.
And that's why in our teacher preparation courses, we need to have those conversations, because what will happen is we'll go default to, oh, I read that book when I was younger. And so this is the book I'm going to use for Latinx, Latina representation. Absolutely. So we're constantly bringing in titles.
And we are at the end of our time. So I want to thank Ritu. I want to thank Tracey and Yaikira for wonderful presentations. And we'll see everybody at the next session.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. Those were wonderful presentations.
Dr. Flores,
Yes,
do you see the last question that I have about you and
I did. And I was like, what do I say about that?
maybe you and Mila could write it together?
I know. We make zines all the time. We make little zines about just different things that happen that have been, she's lost like 4 teeth in the last
Oh my
since
God.
January.
And
She
then
came to Phoenix with all her teeth and now she's leaving like a little bit molacha.
Abuelo y Abuelita are padding that little billfold.
I know.
Mucha money.
She's been getting gift cards because the tooth fairy doesn't have any money on hand.
That's a good idea, actually.
I loved being in conversation with Ritu. I've never met her before. And so I really hope to continue to stay connected to her.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Thank you, Jay Bryce.
I think your 2 presentations just went together very, very well.
Yeah, I'm definitely telling all of my nieces about you, Tracey, and I'm texting the resources to their parent. My husband is Puerto Rican, and we have 16 nieces and nephews, and I know for a fact that they're not getting this stuff in school. So every time I get an Allen box, I give them like half of the books. And then I was like looking at this and I was like, oh my God, they should be in these book groups. They need to email Tracey.
It's just been really healing being with them. And I think that during this past year, I've really found myself reaching out more and trying to create these spaces with the young girls in Somos. Like some of them, they came like, they're in high school now and they came like 3 years ago. And then some of them are more recent. And I feel like the relationships I'm building with their parents in this virtual space is different than when we're in person. Yeah. Because we're constantly like in this communication. And there's my buddy, Brian, he knows what's up. He gets it, like he's doing it. Is there a presentation coming next? Should I leave?
There is. Yeah,
I'm so sorry. I'm just like hanging out.
I had to watch yours because I wanted to see yours, and I had to go shout out to my Syracuse people at the end. They think I was there the whole time. I wasn't. Just at the questions. And Carol wanted to say hi to you. So.
I miss you, Brian. I haven't talked to you in a while.
I know. It'll happen. You're doing. I mean, everything that you are doing is so needed, and like, it's just awesome.
It's like it's healing me too. Like it's what I love it.
I mean, I know that we probably talk about these digital spaces ad nauseum, but it really opens up the ball game to doing really cool family literacy. You know, I did a project once in New York City where we just combined, you know, it was for 4th grade reading loss. And it was like, you had to be a boy, you had to have a grandparent. And if you signed up, you got like 20 books, and we met all throughout the year and we talked about, they're all featured on immigration. And it was like so amazing to have grandparents telling their grandsons stories. I was like, you know, this is before I learned how to collect data. I was like, somebody should be writing about this.
Right. So. When I talk to real quick, and then I'm gonna leave, I promise. When I talk to Dr. B, I'll be like telling him things. He's like, write this down. And I'm like, I need to. Okay, I'm gonna leave because I know there's someone's coming in here. Thank you so much for being our moderator too.
Oh, absolutely. This was wonderful.
Thanks for being here.
Because we're all now going back to the general.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And Dr. B, thanks for being here always.
Rebecca, I'm inside. This is an inside porch.
Are you inside? Oh, thank God. I was like,
the temperature is like 70 degrees, and we have Canadian winds coming down, and it's just cooled off. It's like air conditioned everywhere.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I'm living vicariously through you.
I'm sweating right now in Arizona, and like, yeah.
How's it running, Tracey? So good?
I have to go early.
Yeah.
but it's going, but it's better than.
I have to have
Texas.
surgery again, so I have not been running. So I'm like, oh man,
No.
this whole COVID thing has been like, I walk. I will walk like 8 miles.
Yeah.
I can't run.
Okay, I'm for real leaving. Adios, everyone.
let's
Dr. B, I'll
do
talk
this.
to you later.
All right.
Adios.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.